All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for everyone who's here joining us today. My name is Lisa Partida with Home Again LA, and I'm the resource coordinator for the LPU program. So tonight we have one of our partners, Banc of California, Tom Fuentes, and we're going to be going over managing debt. So I'll go ahead and pass it along.
Thanks, Lisa. So tonight's workshop is going to go over debt. There's 3 or 4 sections, and the first section is going to cover what is debt. So we're going to discuss what debt is, how to understand debts that you may currently have, and how debt relates to your financial situation. So the key takeaway in this section is understanding your debt can be the first step that you can take to managing it. So what's the difference between a credit and a debit? So debt is money that you owe or money that you already borrowed. Credit is the ability to borrow money that you haven't borrowed yet. You can use credit to borrow money, which then becomes debt. You can have credit without having debt. For example, opening a credit card account gives you credit, but you don't incur the debt until you actually use the credit card. So, what's the difference between a creditor and a debtor? Um, Debtors owe money, they borrowed it, and creditors and lenders uh, loan the money. So, understanding your debt, after you gather information about how much you owe, how much your payments are, when your payments are due, and uh, understanding any other important specific factors about the specific debts that you might have incurred. Um, you can think about a little bit elsewhere. So people get into debt for a ton of different reasons. One of those reasons on the wheel you can see is purchasing assets such as cars, homes, going to school, for example, higher education, um, paying bills, or because you're not paying them. So when people can't afford to pay bills in cash, they sometimes incur debt to pay them. For example, you can pay a utility bill using a credit card, which we highly don't recommend, but we have to do what we have to do given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Debt can also result from not paying bills. Cover unexpected expenses or emergencies can be one too. If you don't have the cash set aside for particular emergencies when emergencies come up, think about needing to fix a leaky roof or a broken refrigerator or needing a car repair. That can certainly be a way that you can incur debt. You may be buying things that you don't actually need, and that's the differences between needs and wants. People incur debt to do things like eat out, which is super expensive right now. Due to rising inflation and high food costs, maybe purchasing gifts that are outside of their current budget situation, or purchasing clothing that's name brand that may be unnecessary. So, how debt can affect your financial situation? Debt can affect your financial situation because you'll need to use income you receive in the future to make payments on debts. This is sometimes called obligating future income, which really kind of is an unfortunate situation to think that money that you have in coming in now is pretty much already gone because of the debt that you incurred that you're going to have to pay off in the future. You generally pay interest and sometimes fees on debt until you pay it in full. That means that you're paying more money than you have to pay those items in cash. You may not be able to reach your particular financial goals in situations, or you may reach your goals later than expected, which can be like a complete bummer when you think about it, because um, you really can put yourself in a better financial situation if you're slowly paying off debts actively while saving actively. So this can really impact your long-term money goals. So understand your debts. I highly suggest pulling in something like a credit report from annualcreditreport.com. You can get one for free every year. Do that. Get all of the statements from like the credit cards, if you have a mortgage, if you have a car loan. Understand the terms and obligations of those debts. Combine that with what you can find on your credit report, because understanding your debt can help you manage uh, how you pay that back, right? So let's go into how debt actually work. So we'll discuss common debt terminology and how different types of loans actually work. So the key takeaway from this section is to consider how debt works so that you can make informed decisions about it. So this is just a little bit of debt lingo to understand some different terms. So debt lingo one, a loan with collateral that the lender can take it if the loan is not repaid according to the loan agreement. In this case, anything that's associated with collateral would be option B, a secured loan. For example, a home mortgage would be this because the lender is taking your loan as collateral in case you don't pay the loan back. Debt lingo two, how much you actually borrow. How much you actually borrow. So how much you actually borrow would be considered the principal amount that you owe. Debt lingo number three, the main cost of borrowing money. The main cost of borrowing money in this case would be the interest incurred on the money that you're borrowing. Debt lingo number four, a credit agreement that allows you to borrow money from time to time up to a pre-approved maximum credit line. So an example of this would be a revolving credit. And you can think of a revolving credit in the terms of a line of credit that revolves or a credit card. Debt lingo number five, the total cost of credit on a yearly basis. So in this case, it would be the APR, annual percentage rate. The APR is commonly, or annual percentage rate is commonly referred to as the APR, and it's usually a higher amount than the interest rate. Debt lingo number six, when you borrow a specific amount of money, you repay over a set period of time. That would be an installment loan. Examples of installment loans would be your car, if you have any student loans, or if you have a mortgage. Debt lingo seven, a loan with no collateral. Opposite of our debt lingo number one. In this case, it would be an unsecured loan. Unsecured loans, credit card debt, and student loans are typically unsecured because the lender is not taking collateral. So with an installment loan, you borrow a set of money known as principal. You repay the principal and interest over a set period of time, which is considered the term of the loan. You generally pay the same amount of money every month unless you have a variable or adjustable interest rate. With a variable rate, the monthly payment will be recalculated based on the new interest rate. You will then pay the new monthly payment until the interest rate adjusts again. A lender will use factors that include your credit score and how much your income is that you use to pay debts to determine whether to offer you a loan. Revolving line of credit, you borrow up to a maximum amount, a maximum credit limit. The most you can borrow is considered the credit limit, and it's generally based on the credit-related information that includes your credit score and any other debt that you have. The amount you must pay is based on how much credit you've used. You must pay at least the minimum amount due with every payment, and it's typically 1 to 5% of the outstanding balance. The more you pay, the sooner you pay down the debt, and the less money that you actually pay back in interest over a set period of time. Let's talk about fees. Loan and credit agreements may also have fees associated to them. Fees are additional charges. They are not interest. So for example, credit cards may have annual fees. Credit cards may have late payments, fees associated to whether or not you go over the credit limit, or other fees. Car loans may have a documentation fee. A mortgage loan might have an early payment penalty if you decide to pay it off early, which we'll get into in a sec. So prepayment is the early repayment or of part of the loan or all of the loan. When you prepay, you pay the lender more than your monthly payment, and it's applicable as an extra amount to the outstanding balance. Prepayment is one strategy that you can use to reduce the cost of borrowing money. If you prepay your loan in full, you won't pay any more interest associated to that debt. Lenders sometimes charge a prepayment penalty, however. Find out whether you have this associated to any of your debts by looking at the loan terms. So, key takeaway, consider how debt actually works so that you can be more informed about the decisions that you're making um, about the debts that you currently have. The next section, section 3, we're going to go into discussing how we can go about reducing debt. We're going to explain 2 methods at reducing debt, the high cost debt first method and the snowball method. So the key takeaway of this section is develop a plan to reduce debt and to help if needed, such as from a trained credit counselor or from like a financial literacy workshop that we do here or any other services that Home Again LA offers. So 2 strategies. So many of us want to reduce debt. It's not always easy, but it can be an important financial goal that could be totally worth the effort. So there's 2 general strategies, the high cost first debt method and snowball. High cost debt first method, in which you first pay off the debt that has the highest interest rate, and it's usually the debt with the highest cost to you. Snowball, the snowball method, in which you can pay off the debt with the lowest balance first. Note that both strategies work best if you avoid incurring more debt while you work down to pay the debt you currently have. Neither strategy is better for everyone. It's just context dependent upon your current situation, really. The high cost first debt method has the advantage of saving money because you pay less interest in the long term. The disadvantage is the progress can feel very slow. Let me give you an idea of how it works. So you list your debts in order from the highest cost to you to the lowest. The highest cost debt is usually the debt with the highest interest rate. For credit cards, you can find the interest rate on your monthly statement. For other loans, you can find it on documents you received when you first took the loan out. It may also be on your account statement as well. Pay the amount due on each debt you listed so the lender receives it by its due date. For example, this could be the minimum monthly payment for a credit card or regular monthly payment for a loan. You can often set up automatic payments so that you can kind of set it and forget it so that you're confident that the lender always receives the payment by the due date. Then, if possible, make an extra payment to the first debt on your list. That will be the one with the highest cost associated to you. Ask the lender if you can specify that your extra payment be applied to principal so that it's not counting towards a future payment. After you pay off the first debt, make that extra payment to the next debt on the list and then continue as needed, as you can see. Next up is the snowball method. For the snowball, it has the advantage of making progress faster by eliminating the small debts first, not the debts that have the highest cost to you. The disadvantage is that you actually pay more money because you're going to be paying the costliest debts. So let me give you an idea of how it works. So again, just like the first method we discussed, you're going to list your debts in order, but this time from the lowest remaining balance to the highest. Pay the amount due on each debt you listed so the lender receives it by its due date, of course. You can often set up automatic payments just like you would have in the last scenario. So that way you can make sure that the lender receives the payment on time. Then make an extra payment to the first debt on your list. That will be the one with the lowest balance. Ask the lender if you can specify that the extra payment be applied to principal only, because again, we don't want to have that extra payment go to a future regular payment. After you pay off that first debt, make the extra payment to the next debt on the list, and then so on and so forth. And you can do this in a snowball method. So here's a worksheet that's also going to be in the participant guide to give you an idea of the high cost debt first method. And on this worksheet, let me see, I got to make my screen a little bit bigger here. So we list our debts in order. So we have a credit card we have the credit card where you owe 8,000, medical debt is 10,000, and the car loan is 2,000. And in this case, because we're doing the high cost debt first, we're not ranking them by the amount owed, but we're ranking them by the amount that's owed in interest. And then in the complete opposite, see how we have the credit card and then the medical debt and the car loan. With the snowball method, we're going to order these differently. We're going to order them with the lowest amount first so that we can pay off the lowest amount paid first. So in this case, we have the car loan listed as the debt that we're going to pay off first, listed at $2,000. The credit card, which is at $8,000, and the medical debt at $10,000. And then you can see how this is broken out. With the high cost debt method, if we implement this one, you can see how slow the progress can be made in making payments because we're tackling one that has a high cost to you. But because it's the one that has the highest interest rate, you're going to end up paying less money over time because you're knocking out uh, the highest debt that has the highest interest rate. And then on this one, you can see how you can make progress a lot faster because you're paying off a debt that has less money that you owe to it. Where to get help. So if you need help managing debt, consider seeking help from a nonprofit credit counseling organization. You can also consider getting help from financial literacy workshops that Home Again LA regularly offers. You can go to www.usa.gov and search for credit counseling to find organizations in your local area. Choose where you get help carefully. Debt settlement companies are companies that could take advantage of your situation. Debt settlement companies and debt consolidation loans offer help and relief with debt. Before using these services, be sure you understand them because some services may be offered that can be absolutely costly to you. Debt settlement companies offer to make deals with creditors to reduce debts that you owe. Ask questions about their fees and their processes, though. What fees would you pay, especially upfront fees associated to the cost of them helping you out? Charging a fee before settling at least one of your debts is illegal for the most case. So that could be a red flag. What will they do for you if they tell you to stop paying your creditors and you do so, you may end up owing more debt than when you started. This may lower your credit score and add late fees and interest associated to your accounts. But you can find out more information on consumerfinance.gov to research different debt settlement strategies. Debt consolidation means taking out one loan and using it to pay off multiple debts. So you can see in our chart here, if you have a car loan, if you have a credit card, and you have medical debt, you could use debt consolidation to consolidate and roll in all of these debts into one so that you only have one payment. And sometimes that one payment can end up having a lower interest rate in the end, but make sure that you do your due diligence to find the correct product for your situation. So in closing, develop a plan to reduce your debt and get help if needed. A little help can go a long way. And for the fact that you found this financial literacy workshop, you're already on your way. This is going to be our last section, I believe. What happens with non-payment of debts and debts in collection? So don't ignore a debt from a collector. Make sure any debt you're asked to pay is valid, pay it as soon as possible, and get help if needed. As long as you pay your debts on time and as agreed, your debts are considered to be current, and you'll be eventually pay what you owe, and you'll eventually have it paid off. The life cycle of debt is different if you're not making current payments. If you fall behind on payments, your debts can be considered delinquent. Your account may be described as being 30 days delinquent or 60 days delinquent or more. For some loans, you may be in default as soon as you miss one payment. It just depends. For others, it may take several days, weeks, months, or of non-payment to occur for this to happen. After a debt is in default, some creditors will charge off your account. They give you to a collection agency to try to collect the debt, which is commonly known as a debt collector. So not paying debts, what can happen if you don't pay your debt? Several things can happen. Having to pay late fees or pay more money in interest, being contacted by a debt collector who asks you to make a payment. While you have the right when a debt collector is trying to seek payment from you, you getting calls and letters can be stressful and absolutely annoying. Losing services can result from not paying debts, and it could be a hassle to try to reestablish them. Think about maybe like a utility company, for example. You could lose collateral if you don't pay your debts, including assets that are associated. Think about your mortgage and your house being tied to that. Other things can happen too. You can get negative entries on your credit report. You could get a drop in your credit scores. You could get a wage garnishment where they actually take part of your paycheck automatically. There could be account garnishments associated to money that you owe to debtors or to debt collectors, excuse me, and treasury offsets, which would result in a garnishment if you are able to receive a tax refund from filing your taxes. So before making a plan to pay debt, be sure you know you owe the debt. The statute of limitations has not expired. The statute of limitations is a state law that limits the length of time creditors can collect debt that you owe. You're dealing with the legitimate debt collector. If the debt is legitimate, but you think the collector may not be, contact your creditor about the calls that you're receiving. Share the information you have about suspicious calls and find out who, if anyone, the creditor has authorized to collect the debt. If you know those three things, then you can pay the debt if possible. Payment in full is not possible. If payment in full is not possible, you may be able to set up a payment plan with the debt collector to pay the amount due in installments over a set period of time. You could also negotiate a lower balance that could be considered a payment in full and ask the account be noted as paid in full on your credit report and not settled, because that could be a negative thing on your credit report. Debt collectors also have rules that they have to follow. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act governs the federal standards associated with this. Debt collectors cannot use abusive or unfair practices. For example, they can't contact you at inconvenient time or places, 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, for example. They can't contact you at work. They can't use threats of violence, and they can't use, or they shouldn't use, but can't use obscene or profane language as much as they'd want to. You can go to the FTC's website, the Federal Trade Commission's website, and search for consumer information related to debt collection to learn more about those rules that are associated. And you can also go to consumerfinance.gov to find out more too. So yeah, in section closing, don't ignore a debt collector. Make sure any debt that you're asked to pay is actually yours and it's valid. And get help when needed, and research on the FTC website and consumer finance website if you end up having a debt that goes into collections. Yeah, so that brings us to the conclusion of managing debt.
Thanks, Tom. So I had a quick question for the snowball effect. So because that one always throws me off. I don't know why I always get confused with it. So with the snowball effect, is it recommended to pay off the smallest debt first, or is it taking or tackling the higher percentage rate?
Yeah, so for the snowball one, you want to pay off the debt that has the least amount of cost to you. So if you go back to the example where we had a car loan, medical debt, and the credit card debt, in the snowball, in that scenario, we were paying off the $2,000 debt, which was the least amount, so that we could get that paid off first. And that debt had the lowest interest rate associated to it.
Okay.
So we want to pay that off first. Once that's paid off, we'd go to the next lowest debt. So this method can kind of put a little like fire underneath us, because we're paying off debts faster, because we're paying off the ones that have the lowest dollar amount. But because you're paying off the ones that have the lowest interest rate, you'll end up paying more money over time because you're not getting to those higher interest rate debts until you've knocked it off. It's basically at the bottom of your list. Where if you do the
Mhm.
high cost debt method first, you reprioritize and you would shift those debts. So in that scenario that we talked about, I believe that the highest interest rate was the 14% that was owed to the $8,000 credit card, but we weren't paying the medical debt that was 10,000 because the interest rate was lower. But
Mm.
because the dollar amount of 8,000 is higher, it takes longer for us to pay off that first one before we go to the next one. But we save more money because we're paying less in interest.
Then we're also running the risk of our credit going down.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's true, but your credit is really going to only be affected if you miss the payment.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then don't ignore your bills.
Yeah, so that's the idea of making sure that you're paying the bills on time,
Okay.
and totally recommending setting up like automatic payments so that you don't have to worry about it.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
the issue with setting up automatic payments is often when we do this, in order for either of those methods to work, it's recommended that you make an extra payment to principal so that you're paying the principal down faster. And
Hmm.
when you have automatic payments set up, more often than not, you can't set up that extra principal payment. You can sometimes. I
Hmm.
believe you can for like a mortgage, but
Hmm.
I don't think that's typical for like a car loan or for a credit card.
Yeah, I think you just have to go in there and do that payment right away.
Yeah, you have to
Like
go
just
in there
send an
and
extra
do it
payment.
specifically and tell them what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time and hope you feel better.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa.
All right. Thank you. See you next time.
All right. See ya. Have
Bye.
a good night.
You too.